Yes, what a pleasure to introduce Crystal Chissell. She is the Senior Director of Partnerships at Project Drawdown, and she will discuss the organization focuses on climate action, specifically focusing on greenhouse gas reduction in the atmosphere and the strategies to get there. Crystal herself leads the strategic partnership initiatives and network. In addition, I don't know if she gets tired of this or not, but she is one of the most prodigiously accomplished people you are likely to meet. She holds a degree in journalism from Howard University, a master's in science from Johns Hopkins, an MBA from the University of San Francisco, and a law degree from the University of Maryland. Was an advisor to the city of Baltimore, was a mayor of a town in Maryland, Highland Beach, and also a practicing attorney. So she brings all of that experience to her work at Project Drawdown and to our discussion today. So please welcome Crystal Chissell.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here with you today. I'll tell you a little bit about myself beyond what you just heard. I live in San Francisco, California, and I work at Project Drawdown. I'll tell you much more about Project Drawdown in a minute. But so we're on a Zoom webinar. I can't see your faces. I know you're out there. So let's get to know each other a little bit. And so if you don't mind using the chat function, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. So first, I know that many of us, myself included, have land that we're connected to. It may not be where we're currently located, but at some point in our life, there was some land that was influential in our life. So I wonder if you could put in the chat the name of the land that you feel most connected to. It might be where you are now or somewhere that you have been at another point in your life. Let me tell you a bit about myself and a place I feel connected to. So as a child, I had the privilege of spending all my summers at Highland Beach on the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. And this gave me the opportunity to be connected to a beautiful place and to observe over time an estuary, wetlands, changing shorelines, and the animals, fish, and birds that were native to the area. And this was the experience that formed my interest in the environment and my passion for protecting it. But there's more to the story. So now this is an aerial view of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation headquarters. Geographically, it sits next to Highland Beach on the Chesapeake Bay. And at the very top of this image, you can see Black Walnut Creek and then Highland Beach on the other side of the creek. Now, this building where the Chesapeake Bay Foundation is now located sits on the former site of the very popular resort called the Bay Ridge Resort. It was built in 1879 and it was known as the Queen Resort of the Chesapeake. In 1892, Charles Douglas, who was son of the famous abolitionist Frederick Douglass, visited the Bay Ridge Resort, hoping that he and his wife could have a meal and a place to stay. They were turned away because of their race. They took a stroll down the beach, past the Bay Ridge property, and they had a chance encounter with the owner of the land neighboring the resort. And Charles Douglas saw the opportunity to purchase and develop the site as a vacation community where Black Americans could escape Jim Crow and the restrictive covenants that prevented Blacks from purchasing property. Frederick Douglass went on to build a summer home in this location that he called Twin Oaks. It's in the community of Highland Beach, and this property has had his summer home has had a historical renovation, and it's now preserved as a museum. Now, that community is now the incorporated municipality of Highland Beach, where generations after Frederick Douglass's time, I developed my love of the environment, and where that passion has been intertwined with my heritage as an African American. Now, I have on to our topic for today. I have one more question that I'd like to ask you to put your answers in the chat. So what comes to mind when you think about climate change and global warming? So whatever comes to mind, please pop that in the chat. So in a recent survey, when 14,000 people around the world were asked this question, 44% of people said that they think about the outcomes of climate change, like changing weather and melting ice caps. And we saw a lot of those sorts of responses in our chat. 18% of people said they think about the causes of climate change. So things like burning fossil fuels, like coal, oil, and natural gas. Only 3% of people surveyed said that they think about solutions. So at Project Drawdown, we're working on getting that number to increase by sharing information about climate solutions and focusing on what to do about climate change. So before we discuss climate solutions, let's just talk a bit about the science of climate change. Increased concentrations of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere trap heat from the sun and have led to global warming. Over time, this warming affects weather patterns and results in climate change. Now, there are several greenhouse gases called greenhouse gases because they trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere, causing average global temperatures to rise. Now, carbon dioxide is the most prevalent of these gases, the one that we hear the most about when we're talking about climate change. It's released when we burn fossil fuels and when we burn organic matter, such as trees. But there are several other important greenhouse gases. So methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. It's released from landfills, from the processing of fossil fuels, and also from the digestive tracts of grazing animals. Methane is 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. It lasts for a shorter term in the atmosphere, but it's much more potent while it's there, and we are continuously releasing methane into the atmosphere. Nitrous oxide comes from fertilizers and animal manure. It's about 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And the refrigerant gases, fluorocarbons that are used in our refrigerators and air conditioning systems, these are thousands of times more potent than carbon dioxide in their potential to warm the atmosphere. Now, why are these concentrations of gases increasing in the atmosphere? This gray box represents the Earth's atmosphere. Now, the bands on the left side represent all the types of human activity that send greenhouse gases up into the atmosphere. About 25% come from electricity production. That's the orange band on the left. An equal amount, 24%, come from our food, agriculture, and land use practices. That's the green band. 21% come from industry, 14% from transportation, 6% from buildings, and 10% from other energy-related emissions. Now, some of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is removed by natural, biological, and chemical processes that are called sinks. About 24% is removed by plants through photosynthesis, and that carbon is stored in plants, trees, and soil. And then another 17% is absorbed by the oceans through chemical reactions and photosynthesis by algae and phytoplankton. Currently, the majority of greenhouse gases, about 59%, remain in the atmosphere. Now, what is drawdown? Drawdown is the point where greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere begin to steadily go down each year. It's also a goal for the world. Now, we have not yet reached drawdown. Greenhouse gas levels have been increasing steadily, especially during this past 60 years. This blue dot represents the moment of drawdown. It's the turning point. It's the turning point when the concentrations, the increase stops and begins to go down. Now, how do we achieve drawdown? This is what Project Drawdown is all about. We've been working on answering the question of whether it's possible to reach drawdown using solutions that already exist without any invention of new technology. We've had an international team of researchers working on the answer to this question since 2015, and they continue this research continuously. And our team has conducted a meta-analysis of all the current worldwide research and data about existing climate solutions. And our team has done modeling to project whether it's possible to reach drawdown by the year 2050. And we've done this meta-analysis and modeling for 80 different practices and technologies. Now, the drawdown solutions do not include every climate solution that currently exists in the world. There's a specific subset that we're looking at. So the solutions included in our analysis are categories of technologies and practices that reduce greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And for each of the solutions included, there is scientific consensus backed by data that they are meeting these criteria, currently available and scaling, financially viable, have a proven potential to reduce greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. The positive benefits of these solutions outweigh any negative consequences that they might have. And for each of them, there's sufficient data to be able to model their potential at a global scale. Now, there's no silver bullets included, no theoretical technologies, nothing that is still under development, nothing that can't be scaled. So new technologies and practices, once they are developed and viable, will help us reach drawdown faster. Solutions already exist and are already in practice, but they must be aggressively scaled worldwide in order to reach drawdown. Now, we've categorized the solutions into 3 categories. The first of these categories is reduce the sources of greenhouse gases. So there are solutions that can reduce greenhouse gases that are going up into the atmosphere. And these are very important and effective solutions because they create an immediate reduction in the gases that are going into the atmosphere. Now, in the electricity sector, these are solutions that replace carbon-based electricity with renewable energy as quickly as possible and improve the broader electricity system. So these are solutions such as solar, wind, and water distribution efficiency. Solutions in this category reduce demand for electricity by enhancing efficiency, such as low flow water fixtures. And they improve or replace materials used in industry, such as bioplastics. They reclaim waste as a resource, such as recycled paper and composting. And they address refrigerants, the very potent refrigerant gases that are potent greenhouse gases. The solutions that reduce sources also enhance the efficiency of vehicles and electrify vehicles, such as electric cars and bikes. And these solutions also shift transportation to alternatives, such as telepresence, what we're doing now. And within the building sector, these solutions enhance the energy efficiency of buildings and provide alternatives to the energy sources that are used to heat space, heat water, and prepare meals. And just a word about the improved clean cook stove solution. This is an example of how climate solutions actually solve multiple problems. So there's been work and a movement around improving cook stoves for many years, but not because of climate change. It's because half the world's population cooks food on stoves that burn wood, charcoal, and other biomass to heat and cook food. This has had a very negative health effect on the people who use these stoves. They inhale the particulates, suffer all sorts of health problems because of this, and premature death. So there's been a movement around improved clean cook stoves. And indeed, this may be the more important reason to pursue this solution, but it also can have a very, very impactful effect on climate change as well. Now, there are a number of solutions within the food, agriculture, and land use sector that can address the 24% of greenhouse gas emissions worldwide that are generated by this sector. And these solutions protect ecosystems like forest protection and shift agricultural practices. Now, relative to all other solutions in this sector, two have the greatest potential to reduce emissions. So this slide shows a representation of the solutions within the food, agriculture, and land use sector. The size of the circles shows the potential of each solution relative to the other solutions in that sector. Now, the two large circles on the left represent two powerful solutions: plant-rich diet and reduced food waste. So let's talk about the plant-rich diet solution. So for purposes of this analysis, Project Drawdown defines the solution in a specific way. So it means that individuals around the world, one, maintain a minimum of 2,250 calories per day diet. So a healthy diet, a nourishing diet. Two, individuals will reduce their meat consumption, particularly red meat. So this is a reduction. It's not, we're not defining it as the world everyone becomes a vegan. It's a reduction of meat consumption. And it's a reduction of meat consumption for people who are over consuming meat. So we're also not defining this in a way that implies that people who are undernourished or wanting to include meat in their diets as they can afford to or have resources are not allowed to do so. It doesn't mean that. We're looking more at an equity around the world. And then the third criteria as part of the definition is that people purchase locally produced food when it's available. Now, in Project Drawdown's analysis of this solution, we project the emission reduction potential if 50% of the world's population adopts a plant-rich diet as it's defined. So if that 50% adoption of this solution is achieved, there's a potential to reduce or avoid about 65 gigatons of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere over 30 years. Now, part of this definition of this solution is that undernourished people around the world will begin to have adequate food at the same time as those who are consuming excessive calories reduce their consumption. So at the same time that we increase use of climate solutions, we must improve life for everyone around the world, especially people experiencing poverty and injustice. So we're at this critical time where we can actually improve many and solve many problems around the world through our implementation of climate solutions. Now, livestock production is responsible for about 14.5% of global emissions and about 65% of the emissions that come from agriculture. About a third of all crops grown are for livestock feed, and over a quarter of the world's entire land area is used to graze or grow food for farm animals. So this means that livestock products like meat and dairy require much more land to produce protein than plant-based foods. And also grazing animals like cows, sheep, and goats produce a large amount of methane as part of their digestion that they release into the atmosphere. So shifting to a more plant-rich diet reduces the amount of land required for agriculture and will help us to avoid deforestation. And this deforestation is happening to make more room for more animals that will be used for meat. Now, like almost all of the drawdown solutions, the plant-rich diet solution has multiple benefits. And these are benefits that we would want even if climate change were not happening. So the benefits of the plant-rich diet are improved health, avoiding the clearing of land, protecting ecosystems, and feeding more people with fewer resources. Now, reduce food waste. How is reduced food waste a climate solution? This solution is defined as minimizing food loss and waste at all stages, from production, distribution, retail, and consumption of food. Worldwide, 30 to 40% of all food produced is wasted across the supply chain from source to consumer. And when food is wasted, all of the energy, resources, and money that go into producing, processing, packaging, and transporting it are also wasted. The closer to the consumer that the food gets before it is wasted, in other words, by the time it reaches this grocery store or your refrigerator, the more resources have been used to get it to that stage, and those resources are also wasted. Now, if you're a wine producer, you know the amount of resources that go into production, and you know that electricity, fuel, water, and other resources are used at every stage of production. If we reduce food waste by improving storage and transport systems, by generating public awareness, and by changing consumer behavior, this solution could lead to substantial reductions in waste and emissions. In Project Drawdown's analysis, we look at the potential of a 50% reduction in total global food waste by the year 2050. If that 50% reduction is achieved, there's the potential to reduce or avoid about 87 gigatons of carbon dioxide and carbon dioxide equivalent in the atmosphere. And this is actually far more than any of the individual electricity sector solutions. So we also assume in this analysis that this loss and waste of resources can in part be diverted to feed undernourished people. So built into this analysis is the assumption that the world can begin to reduce food insecurity as we reduce emissions from food waste. Benefits of this solution are that it saves money, allows us to feed more people with fewer resources. And same as with the plant-rich diet solution, it helps to avoid the clearing of land and it protects ecosystems. Now, this brings us to the second category of solutions, and that is solutions that support the land sinks. Now, you'll remember that the sinks are the natural processes shown on the right side of this graphic that draw carbon out of the atmosphere. Solutions that support sinks use degraded land, shift agricultural practices, and protect and restore ecosystems. And many of these solutions also fall in the category of reducing sources of emissions. But for these solutions, their greatest impact is as land sinks. And a few examples: conservation agriculture, regenerative annual cropping, silvopasture, and this is a practice where trees are incorporated into grazing land. And when trees are incorporated into grazing land, the land has a potential to reduce much more, to biosequester much more carbon dioxide than pastures without trees. And another example is managed grazing. Now, there's a third category of solutions that we call improved society. Although most climate solutions have co-benefits that solve problems beyond climate change, there's one specific drawdown solution that falls in this category. So when people have access to quality education and levels of education rise, particularly for girls and young women, uptake of reproductive health care improves where it's available. In turn, and we're talking about voluntary uptake of reproductive health care. In turn, women's political, social, and economic empowerment expands, and fertility rates in countries typically fall. So the result is a slower population growth and therefore reduced consumption. And this is particularly impactful in high-income countries where consumption related to emissions is highest. Now, although some solutions offer greater potential emissions reduction, climate solutions are interconnected and interdependent, so we must scale all of them to reach drawdown. So that's why we look at this full landscape of climate solutions. So solutions don't scale by themselves. In order to scale climate solutions, we'll need much broader changes that can remove barriers to the implementation of solutions and accelerate their adoption. So we'll need cultural shifts that focus on solutions and action. We'll need to build the power behind the societal transformation that's needed to scale solutions. We'll need to set clear goals for what we'll achieve and by when. We'll need shifts in laws and policies to support the advancement of solutions. We'll need investment and philanthropy to support solutions. We'll need behavior change from individuals and institutions. And finally, even though we have the full suite of proven drawdown solutions, innovation can improve these solutions and also add to the number of solutions that will help us reach drawdown more quickly. And one more thing that should be on this list is that you, or people like you, are using their thinking and their creativity to solve problems and benefit communities. So I'd like to show a brief video about a collaboration in Pennsylvania that brought solar power to a community, along with some possibly unexpected partners.
The comparison of sunlight and seeds is we wouldn't have any seeds without sunlight. Our little seeds are actually solar receptors themselves, but you have to realize there's a life inside those seeds, and you have to take care of it and preserve it. Ernst Farms is a big incubator of life in that way.
Utilizing some of the pollinator-friendly seeds that we have at Ernst Farms, developers of the solar industry could also give back to the agricultural business by establishing pollinators in amongst their arrays. So we thought this was a win-win situation and that we should take it and educate people about it and hopefully from there end up doing business. I like the fact that Voodoo Brewery has brought in the honey and that they are utilizing pollinator array farm honey in their product. I also appreciate Voodoo Brewery due to their community efforts, so that we here in Meadville are collaborating together as not just businesses, but as a community.
For the honey lager, we used our own lager yeast strain for it. Our brewer added the honey during the whirlpool, a little bit of honey malt to it to really accent the flavor, and it probably lagered for about 5 or 6 weeks and came out real crisp, real clean.
We were really lucky to meet up with the solar farms and have this chance to use honey. It's a starting point now to have the honey lager, but it's definitely something we look to go forward with and use it in more products.
So renewable energy has always been very important to the craft brewing industry. It's often out of necessity, and it's not even always about energy. So anytime that we have an ingredient or a group of people that come to us with a plan or an ingredient that we can throw in there, continues to bring the conversation forward about how to challenge what we drink, what we eat, and how we affect our local communities.
I'm so proud of local businesses like Voodoo Brewery that are joining forces with us in not only just educating our consumers and our lawmakers on solar benefits, but also leading by example. I think that's what we need. Solar isn't just about clean energy, but it's the new future, which is good for Pennsylvanians and Pennsylvania's economy.
The local agricultural community can see this as a welcomed program because there's a lot of land that farmers are having a hard time holding on to. So the fact that these developers can come in and help us to hold on to our 3rd and 4th generation lands with leases is a big help to the community.
On a solar array, a high percentage of the land can be available for pollinator habitat, and so it's just a natural use of that land. In a sense, it gets double use, but we're actually replacing habitat that has become endangered.
Community solar is a fairly simple concept. Imagine yourself as a homeowner or a small business who does not have suitable rooftop space or does not have the upfront investment to put your own rooftop solar panels. So by participating in a shade facility like community solar, you can still get access to clean energy without having to put your own money in or without having to worry about suitable rooftop.
All I would ask my state legislative is to keep encouraging it. Don't keep going back and forth on if this is going to be a good idea. What world are we in that we still need to debate whether it's a good idea?
So now I would like to ask you to answer this question again. What comes to mind when you think about climate change and global warming? And pop that your response in the chat. Thanks for sharing your answers. So I want to tell you about some more resources if you want to learn more about climate solutions. This is the book Drawdown that Project Drawdown published in 2017. This is a update to the research and modeling that was done and published in the book Drawdown. This is more updated results of our modeling with more updated data in the Drawdown review. This publication is available for free download at our website. And we have just recently released this Climate Solutions 101 video series that is available at our website. And that just presents a total of 90 minutes of video about climate solutions. And all of these resources are available at drawdown.org. We also have another publication available at drawdown.org called Farming Our Way Out of the Climate Crisis. And this is a publication focused specifically on the food, agriculture, and land use solutions. So thank you so much for your time today and for thinking together about solutions.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you very much. I'm sure there are questions. If people want to pop those into the Q&A, that would be great. We could spend some time looking at those. You mentioned that there are no silver bullets, but I've heard you mention elsewhere this concept of silver buckshot, which I loved.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, or maybe that's in the way that it weaves in with what you just took us through.
Yeah, there's often, and I think this is part of our culture, we want a prescription, like a pill to take, or one thing that will help us out of it, a magic technology that will solve the problem without us having to make broader changes. And that's just not the reality that we're facing. We need a broad spectrum of solutions, and we'll need to make a lot of societal changes worldwide to scale them. I think a good example is just comparing the reduced sources solutions to the support sink solutions. So it's really important that we implement the solutions that will stop the emissions going up into the atmosphere. Once we can reduce these emissions, that's actually a permanent change. Those are gases that are never going to go up into the atmosphere. On the support sink side, these are very effective potential solutions, but there's still a lot of unanswered questions about the potential, because once land reaches a saturation point, then the continuous biosequestration of that carbon will slow down. Further, once land is disturbed, then that carbon is released back to the atmosphere. So if the solution practices stop, or if land is disturbed because of the effects of climate change, like storms and fires, then there's a potential for that carbon to be released. So we really need the full spectrum of solutions.
That ties into something I was thinking about when I've looked at other interviews you've given, or with Jonathan Foley, your executive director. There is the against the backdrop of something cataclysmic heading our way, and the way in which people relate to climate change and the fear around it. And yet, when you present and everything presented in the Drawdown sort of set, it's always pragmatic, frankly, kind of hopeful, and it's all calm. It's an interesting company culture in a way. I'm curious about that.
Yes, well, I think that's because our focus is on solutions. So there's much work that's been done for decades on the problem of climate change, global warming. There's much, scientists have done a fantastic job of showing what the problem is. And that is really important that we have that awareness. But then we've got to go beyond that and start to work on solutions, scaling solutions. So I think that it's not necessarily that, I mean, I'd like to think that we had a calm culture and that everyone's always calm, but I'm not sure it's that. I think it's just that we have a focus on solutions. It's really, in my way of thinking, really not necessary that we convince more people that there's a problem and get more people to panic, because we've already reached a tipping point worldwide of people who are concerned about climate change. So we can, at this point, I think, just skip over the step where we get more people upset about the problem and focus people on the solutions. So the reason why there is this set of drawdown solutions that we were able to study is because they've been in existence for many decades, at least. And the reason for that is because they solve other problems that humanity faces. So they have an effect on greenhouse gases, but they've been in existence and scaling because they serve other purposes or solve other problems. So really, our focus should be on scaling these solutions that we already know exist. And as I said earlier, once new technologies come on board, come online, then we'll be able to reach drawdown faster. But we need to be sure that those are safe for our world and implemented equitably and without further harm to humanity.
The social aspect of the work is also interesting, that the focus on the human quality of life as creating climate benefits. I find that very powerful in the clear ways in which it's expressed.
Yeah, I think it's super important because you know, had we been focused on care of humanity, we may not be facing this climate change problem to date. So like oil and gas production is extremely toxic, especially to people who are living in proximity to this production. So had there been more of a focus on less harm, we may not be facing the climate crisis today. So it's really important as we go forward that solutions are implemented in a way that cares for people, cares for all the living inhabitants of Earth.
Yeah. There's a question here. Crystal, do you have pointers to specific solutions from regenerative farming to help carbon drawdown? Extra credit for vineyard or orchard examples.
Sorry, I do not. And that's a little bit, I think that's a little bit beyond the scope of our organization's work to date, where we have been mainly focused on the potential of the various solutions to reduce greenhouse gases, along with a study of, you know, the mechanisms that make this possible. So I would say to go to drawdown.org. We do have a web page for each of the solutions that are included. And on each of those pages, you'll see a link for the technical summary for the solution. And that there you'll be able to see the write-up from our research team that gives more specifics about the solution.
Thank you. I appreciated in the video that it's a very gentle way of reinforcing the idea that there are the economic benefits of this work for all of us, because I think that probably is one of the, you know, the, like, criticism may be the wrong word, but the things that people throw up to block climate action are the economics or how it'll impact business and whatnot. So I'm glad to see that sort of baked into the presentations.
Yes, so Project Drawdown's analysis does include a financial analysis for the solution. It's on a global scale, so it's not down at the level of the individual business, but overall, climate solutions do actually have economic benefit. So our analysis includes like how much it will cost to implement a given solution globally, and looks at the initial implementation of the solution as well as the use or the operation of the solution over time. So when we look at the solutions together as a whole, the savings exceed the cost by about 4 to 5 times over.
So with so much work in progress and work already done, one might ask what comes next for Project Drawdown. Where is the focus ahead in addition to the work you're currently doing?
So we will continue the research and analysis that we have been doing since 2015 because the landscape is constantly changing. More data becomes available. We'll be including, our research team has been working on a set of ocean related solutions that will be adding to the solution set. So that should be released in the next few months. And then we have some specific programs that are underway. One focused on the collaborative effort with business partners to develop tools that can be used broadly by businesses to scale solutions. Another program that will be focused more on the health benefits and poverty alleviation benefits of solutions. And more, also developing more tools to educate people about climate solutions.
Wow, that's a full slate. That's terrific. Well, thank you so much for the presentation and for joining us today and being part of the live annual meeting. And there's so much more, as Chris pointed out, in the book and on the website, and it's terrific. And so thank you very much. Really appreciate you being here today.